Welcome to the California Housing and Community Development Training Series. Today's session is titled Section 3 Overview. This training will provide an overview of Section 3, its applicability, a general workflow, and the overall goals. CDBG CV grantees and subrecipients, to the greatest extent possible, must provide training, employment, contracting, and other economic opportunities to low and very low income persons, especially recipients of government assistance for housing, as well as businesses that provide economic opportunities to low and very low income persons. Section 3 applies to contracts valued at $200,000 or more for housing construction, housing rehabilitation, or other public construction projects, regardless of how the grant funds are spent within the project, for instance, acquisition or professional services. Section 3 does not apply to contracts less than $200,000 or projects that do not involve rehabilitation and new construction, such as direct homebuyer assistance for the purchase of standard housing, or subsistence payment activities, such as a rental assistance program. Grantees and subrecipients must perform different tasks during the following phases of Section 3 covered projects. During the procurement phase, grantees must determine if the project triggers Section 3 requirements, and if so, insert Section 3 language into the bid documents. After the bidder is selected, and prior to the start of construction, Section 3 language must also be inserted into the contract. Contractors and subcontractors should be provided training on how to comply with Section 3 requirements, including the submittal of all hours worked on the CDBG CV funded project. After construction begins, and throughout the remainder of the project, grantees must collect and review the total labor hours and documentation and perform employee interviews. Report on the total labor hours and the proportion of labor hours worked by Section 3 and targeted Section 3 workers. After construction is completed, but before the project is closed out, grantees must ensure all labor hours for the project, including those worked by Section 3 and targeted Section 3 workers, have been reported. If the Section 3 goals are not met, a written justification must be provided. There are two goals for each Section 3 covered project. First, 25% of labor hours must be performed by Section 3 workers, and second, 5% of labor hours must be performed by targeted Section 3 workers. Please note that a key change occurred as it relates to reporting accomplishments towards meeting these goals. Entities carrying out Section 3 covered projects must report on all labor hours tied to said project instead of just the number of jobs. Grantees and subrecipients that do not meet both goals must provide a written justification. In this scenario, there were a total of 1,000 hours worked by all laborers in connection with the rehabilitation of a community center which was subject to the Section 3 requirements. Of those 1,000 hours worked, 240 hours were performed by Section 3 workers, and 100 hours were performed by targeted Section 3 workers. The number of hours worked by Section 3 workers fell short of the 25% goal, but the number of targeted Section 3 workers was double the 5% goal. Since the Section 3 worker goal was not met, the grantee or subrecipient may provide written justification that although the Section 3 worker goal was not met, the targeted Section 3 worker goal was exceeded. So now, let's test your knowledge. For each CDBG CV funded project, indicate whether or not Section 3 requirements apply. The answers are provided on the next slide. Here are the answers. How'd you do? Section 3 requirements would apply to the acquisition of land for new housing construction because it exceeds the $200,000 threshold and is related to housing construction. Section 3 requirements would not apply to the rehabilitation of a single housing unit because it does not exceed the $200,000 threshold. Section 3 requirements would apply to an architectural or engineering services contract for public facility improvements because it exceeds the $200,000 threshold and is related to public construction. Section 3 requirements would not apply to a homebuyer assistance program because it is not related to housing construction, rehabilitation, or other public construction. Section 3 requirements would not apply to a subsistence payment program such as a rental assistance program because it does not exceed the $200,000 threshold, nor is it tied to housing construction, rehabilitation, or other public construction. Section 3 requirements would apply to the rehabilitation of 2 housing units owned by a single owner since the total project cost of $250,000 exceeds the $200,000 threshold. Section 3 requirements would not apply to the community center rehabilitation project since it does not exceed the $200,000 threshold. The Section 3 requirements can be found at 24 CFR Part 75. Thank you for attending this California Housing and Community Development training session on Section 3. If you have any further questions, please contact your grant administrator.